Democrats are truly desperate to reach younger voters, and whatever they've been doing, it's not working. And it feels like just about everybody has hurled solutions at them. More YouTube, less TikTok. More t-shirt, less suit. Can you walk and talk at the same time? No? Okay, moving on. The funny thing about life is you never know where you're gonna find the solution to your biggest problem. But sometimes the New York Times bestseller list is a great place to start. This book, Abundance, has had liberals in a chokehold since it came out. Let me try to boil it down for you, because clearly I did read it. Trump's entire sales pitch and vibe relies upon this sense of perceived scarcity. Immigrants are the reason for the housing shortage. China is the reason your kid's gonna have $2 instead of $30. Etc. This book is all about presenting the alternative, like removing barriers to build baby build, creating a system of abundant clean energy. I'm gonna let Derek Thompson, one of the co-authors, tell you the rest, because he's definitely got his mileage in. Like, he and his co-author Ezra Klein have been on what I can only describe as a Cowboy Carter world media tour since this book dropped. But I hate to say it, they really missed one thing. And that is selling their vision to the generation that has more potential to buy in than literally any other. So let me give you Derek Thompson pitching abundance directly to us. Let me know in the comments what moment sold you. So I wanna try to do a little exploration of what it would take to get Gen Z to buy into abundance, wholly, fully getting on board. So I wanted to start with like this idea that young people are desperate for something to believe in, but we're also highly suspicious. That's just the world that we've been born into. And I think that's like a wretched and unfavorable combination. I just wanted to set that out there as distrust, suspicion, but also desperation for a vision of the future that we can find for ourselves. That being the case, coming out of the last election, scarcity is everywhere, which you define as the opposite of abundance. That is a choice that the government makes. Do you see abundance as a philosophy, or is it a daily practice?
I want to go back to something you said that I think is really powerful, which is that young people today feel like they don't trust institutions. And I feel like sometimes folks who have my politics, people who are liberal, people who are Democrats, will try to defend the status quo, will try to defend institutions, will try to defend the establishment. And I think that is not always the right path. I think the first thing to say when young people say that they've lost trust in institutions is to say, maybe that's because the institutions have earned your distrust. So I think it's really important to be clear that young people are not wrong. It's not a matter of like misinformation that young people are always skeptical of institutions. In some cases, it is the result of information. They are seeing reality correctly. And one thing this book tries to do, one thing that Abundance tries to do, is to take government seriously. Right? I'm a liberal. I believe in a good, strong, muscular government. I think the government is really necessary to help build the material foundations for a good life. But sometimes that means recognizing the way that we've done things wrong. And so I think there's this difficult tension, this unfortunate hypocrisy, where liberals say that we're the party that cares most about the working class, and yet we're also the party that in many cases governs areas that the working class feels like they can't afford to live in. I think that's a failure that requires us to look in the mirror. It's not exclusively the fault of Democrats, but this is a place where we can really intervene on behalf of young people.
I want to get to all of those policy areas in a second, but just thinking a little bit more about the Gen Z psychology and how they can participate in furthering technology and making things abundant. I'm like, what are the little pieces of abundance that I can already detect in the Gen Z mindset? From there, I kind of moved into like, Gen Z has this other bad addiction, I'll call it bad, to overconsumption, which is, somewhat of abundance of things and wanting many things in your life that make you happy. Does Gen Z's level of commitment to like getting their material possessions scare you in terms of what you're trying to lay out here?
There's ways that I'm afraid of how consumerism and Gen Z sort of fits together. So let me say the happy stuff first, then I'll say the sad.
Perfect.
This is a book about getting shit done. In many ways, this is a book about taking government seriously and expecting government to get shit done and being really pissed off when it doesn't get shit done, right? When the state of California authorizes $33 billion to build high-speed rail and 20 years later, high-speed rail does not exist in California, that's embarrassing.
Humiliating.
When the Biden administration authorizes $50 billion to build rural broadband and electric vehicle charger stations, and basically none of it is built, that is also embarrassing, right? There is story after story in this book of how bureaucratic rules, of how rules the government has written for itself get in the way. And if Gen Z people are watching this or listening to this, and maybe they feel like they're at a company that has this set of bureaucratic rules that they don't understand, that they feel like just get in the way of allowing them to do their best work. Well, the frustration that you feel, in your way at your company is the frustration that we feel writ large about so much governance in America. And so there's a way there in which I think the spirit of Gen Z is like very much in keeping with the spirit of this book. At the same time, I wrote this book, Abundance, but I also write a lot of sort of social criticism. And I would say that one of my biggest fears for Gen Z is that they have adopted a set of technologies, the smartphone, social media, that are exquisite at entertainment convenience. And you could even say at entertainment abundance in a weird way. It is just so much easier to entertain yourself in any given moment with high quality video or podcasts or YouTube or something else. But there's like a receipt here. There's a price to be paid. And one of the prices to be paid is that if you look at the American Time Use Survey, which is this federal government survey of how people spend their time every single year, young people today spend less time in face-to-face socializing than any generation in recorded history. And it's not a problem of mere loneliness, right? Loneliness is this term that sociologists sometimes define as a gap between felt and desired social connection. And so if you're lonely, theoretically what you should want, very desperately, is to be around other people. But there's this trend that my wife showed me on TikTok where you'll see young people have plans canceled. And they'll like do a little dance and make like a little funny video about how happy they are when their plans are canceled. It's just kind of interesting that the generation that sees other friends less than any other generation also celebrates when those plans, those scarce plans with friends are canceled. My theory here is that what's happening is something like this. We pull out our phone and we're on TikTok or on Instagram and we're flipping, and we're just dumping dopamine onto our phone. Just hit, dopamine is being dumped. What's happening is after scrolling for a while, our natural or our baseline levels of dopamine are dropping. So we put down the phone and then, you call me, a friend calls me and says, hey, Derek, you wanna get a drink? And my dopamine, which is the drive biochemical, is totally depleted. I have no drive. And so all I can think about are all the various forms of misadventure. That means I have to get dressed. I have to comb my hair. I've got this little cowlick over here. I've got to find the right shoes. I gotta, get in my car and drive. And oh my God, what about the parking? All of the ways that hanging out might be a misadventure are populating in my head. And I don't have the dopaminergic drive to push through it. So as a result, I say, no, I'm sorry, I can't hang out. And I text, I cancel, and then I pull out my phone again and I keep dumping dopamine. So I think that what's happening here is that we are reserving our dopamine for glass, for screens, rather than for people. And that's the problem. So sorry to take your question about abundance in a totally different...
I love this. I love this. Something I think a lot about is apathy. Just people don't care. They just, young people, I don't care. It doesn't matter. I don't care. Which is, that's been a refrain of young people forever, but it feels particularly saturated right now. And I think that that's precisely because they don't have any dopamine to give or to lend to an issue that they might otherwise care about. I've been doing a show on social media for 4 years at this point, I think. And every time I, put a call out and say, what do people want to hear about? What kind of stories do you want to hear? Yeah, climate change, climate. Nobody ever talks about climate. Why doesn't anybody say anything about climate? You go make a climate change piece, cratered. Like nobody watches it. It's like the worst numbers of any topics you could ever see. So finally I put a little notice out and I was like, hello, you freaks, like you are asking for this and I am giving it to you. What's the problem? And they're like, we want to show that we care about it, but then don't actually want to perform the caring about it. And I'm like, that is a deep, deep issue that needs to be resolved if we're gonna have a future on this planet. How do you fight against that at even just like the base level?
Yeah, I have my own frustrations with some aspects of environmentalism where I think that we're clinging to like a 1960s model of environmentalism, which says that the way to solve the problems of planetary despoliation is to stop everything, right? Stop oil and stop gas and stop using and stop living a modern life and don't drive and don't do this. It's a politics of less. And what's tough about that is the politics of less is very easy to talk about. It's very hard to actually do. It's very unpopular to do. People want to live modern lives. They want to use air conditioning. They want to heat their homes. They want to drive. They want to drive the cars that they want to drive and not just the cars that the most moralizing people around them want them to drive. And so one tension that I see in modern environmentalism is that this sort of politics of, reduce, reuse, recycle, limit your footprint, which is very popular in the 1960s, 1970s, might not be everything that we need to solve the climate challenges that we face today. And so I think that being an environmentalist in the 2020s recognizes that the problems that we face today aren't the problems of the 1940s, 1950s, right? The most important problem is not that the air in Los Angeles is dirty and the water in New Hampshire is undrinkable. The problem, which sometimes was the case 70 years ago, the problem is that to live a modern life requires the inevitable burping up of carbon dioxide that is heating the atmosphere and changing global climate. And there's really only two solutions. You can either ask people to deprive themselves of a modern life, which is very, very difficult politically, and I think doomed to fail, or you can try like hell to build the technology necessary to power a modern life with clean energy. And my politics agitates rather dramatically toward the latter.
I think it should be a more regular part of conversation of like, what does innovation look like? How can me and my friend go and try to create something and just fiddle around, whatever? And I was just like blown away by what the government's putting money into in terms of incubation in the past, these like labs that they were seeing these amazing things out of. And I had this crazy idea. I was like, what if we rebranded that and gave it an ambassador? And that ambassador is Mr. Beast, who is constantly putting these humans in these unsustainable scenarios and they're finding a way out of them. Is there like a branding exercise that we as a nation could go through to promote the value and importance of creative ideas?
I would love it if Mr. Beast raised interest in American science and technology. I think that'd be fantastic. I also want to take Mr. Beast very seriously at his word. And Mr. Beast cares a lot about making popular YouTube videos.
Yes.
He cares, it seems to me, almost explicitly about making successful and popular YouTube videos. And that's a fine end. But remember when I said that like abundance is all about being outcome oriented. The outcome of making the most popular YouTube video is not necessarily the outcome for designing the best science and technology policy for America to cure cancer and cure diseases and other ideas that we have in the book, create factories that grow lab-grown meat and manufacture pharmaceuticals in the low orbit zero gravity of outer space. I mean, these are really, really complicated, gnarly problems. We spend so much of our lives being mass, MASS, mass consumers, right? We are mass when we watch White Lotus. We're mass when we watch House of the Dragon. We're mass when we watch Mr. Beast. We're mass when we watch something on Netflix that everyone else is watching. We spend so much of our lives doing whatever everybody else around us is doing. Wouldn't it be more valuable to be niche as producers, to be as niche as producers as we are mass as consumers? Right? We have an opportunity in the scarce breaths that we have on Earth, do something that's really, really unique. Of course, you can join an investment bank and you can join a consulting firm and you can join some marketing firm and those are fine jobs. But there are also jobs where if you're not there, it's likely that they're going to hire someone else to do your job. It's much more compelling to me to think what's a big, thorny, fascinating problem that not enough people are working on. Right? That's where I would really charge people to get into science and technology, because there are enormous, enormous challenges that we frankly just don't know how to solve. There are so many fascinating challenges whose solution would be truly heroic. And I think it's cool to think about spending one's career doing something a little bit heroic and something a little bit niche, because we spend so much of our lives being mass. That's fine. Be mass at 8:30 on a Tuesday. Do something niche and heroic between 9 and 5.
Yeah, we're gonna spur a movement to revitalize the importance of imagination. I think bring back magical thinking is the spirit that I think Gen Z needs.
Agreed.